3, 2, 1. Individuals are entitled right to death and how to choose their death, even at the expense of all the social harm and social narrative that they have explained. Yes, we agree social movement will get stuck. Yes, we agree that there will be some problematic pernicious social narrative. We don't care. My right to pursue my personal life experience is far more important than external social harm that will happen or will not happen anyway. Based on that, I would like to introduce two arguments, two extensions from closing government. First of all, right to death overrides any social effects. Thirdly, medical development. Many medical options other than euthanasia will be created. Therefore, we can facilitate more informed medical decision and judgment eventually. So my first extension, the rebuttal to the other side of the house will be incorporated into each of the extensions. First extension, right to death overrides social effects. The thesis of this argument is that all individuals are entitled inalienable rights to access death and choose how to die. And this fundamental human rights overrides social narrative that opposition would argue. We are happy to buy that trade-off. Let me prove this with 5 logics. First of all, death is the subjective experience. Not only it is a subjective experience, but it's the subjective experience. What death means to individual is different from person to person. State is uniquely unqualified to make the universal moral decisions over all citizens. Not everyone subscribes to conservative religious view, such as life has sanctity, according to opening opposition. Everyone has different perception about life, and that is subjective. For example, ex-president of Netherlands underwent euthanasia recently. Why is that? Because he and his wife were both ill. He didn't want to leave his loved one alone. Therefore, both of them decided to go to heaven together. And we need to respect that kind of way of pursuit of life as a subjective life experience. State has no right to deny people from accessing the best end of and best period of their life. Secondly, failure of the state. We understand people commit suicide and euthanasia out of various reasons, maybe life fatigue, maybe a lot of social problems. But the thing here is the state fails to address those problems. Therefore, state has no right to use these people as a tool for social engineering. We agree that we need to pay attention to social narrative or what kind of normative standard which will be created as a result of the policy. However, state has no right to sacrifice individuals as an apparatus and to create a generous social engineering and social narrative, because the kind of narrative that opposition argue is unforeseeable. That may happen or may not happen in the future. We don't know. We don't know to what extent the taboo on discourse will be diminished, to what extent the sanctity of life will be disrespected in their society. This unforeseeable consequences versus the rights of individual who need this operation now. They need this operation desperately. Otherwise, their life is tantamount to living hell and living torture. State doesn't own people, and individuals are not responsible for creating social outcome. Therefore, it is unfair for the state to deny access from these people to the most important part of their life. Thirdly, ownership of body extends even after life. The opening government explains that bodily autonomy exists, but we would say that ownership extends even after life. For example, will on distribution of inheritance or post-mortem bodily autonomy, such as organ donation after your death. The impact of death is subjective, thereby all individuals have a right to determine what to do with their life other than the state. Fourthly, about consent and free will. This is a major rebuttal from open opposition. Not yet. So there are several things here. First of all, as open opposition explained, that there will be a lot of discourse, right? There are people like open opposition who are trying to convey countervailing views about euthanasia. There are some people who are criticizing euthanasia. What happened is that on our side of the house, the public discourse and debate will be more active, more activated political dialogue about euthanasia will happen. Thus, people are exposed to more diversified information. We can better facilitate informed decisions as people have more access to different perspective, interpretation of euthanasia. Secondly, any choice is about degree of free choice and coercive choice. There is no perfectly free choice. There is no perfectly coerced choice. All choices are placed in between perfectly coercive choice and perfectly free choice. Therefore, there is no qualitative distinction between this choice of going to euthanasia and other life-threatening choices. For example, even in the status quo, people are allowed to enter military, people are allowed to enjoy combat sports. There are so many other activities such as going to combat zone and so on. Therefore, there's all about degree and spectrum of free choice and coercive choice. It is discriminatory to discriminate only this choice against all the other rights. Even if opposition would argue that there are some extreme scenario that people are literally coerced to undergo euthanasia, we would say that is a crime. If you are physically and literally forced and coerced to undergo euthanasia, and that's a crime, that's out of the debate. Finally, even if we consider there are some people who make an irrational decision, but that's not a reason to deny the rights of the rest of moderate individuals, because the moderate individuals are not responsible for the choice made by a limited number of crazy and irrational individuals. Before moving on, I will take point of nobody expects strong team.
Yes. So the question you ask the individuals on the government side is biased in a way you choose it. Why can you say that this is a good choice that you want to support?
Yes, that nicely goes into my second extension, medical development. The thesis is that many medical options other than euthanasia will be created under our model. Therefore, people have more variety of choices in the first place. Why is that? First of all, free market or market will be created. We will say in the status quo, relatively rich and middle class people go to Netherlands or travel to Netherlands and enjoy euthanasia or undergo that procedure. When people get old, people want to die with respect. Therefore, on outside of the house, much more people, the larger number of people will enter this market. There will be more active investment, research going on. As a result of that, medical corporations or pharmaceutical corporations or even the government will find out a variety or plethora of different options for those who are suffering from terminal ill. For example, pain mitigating tools, pain mitigating techniques, technologies, or medicines that mitigates the harm when individuals feel pain at the end of the death. Therefore, many different options will be available on the side of us. Why is that important? Because state has a duty to facilitate safe mitigation and medication as much as possible. That's why the doctor is a licensed occupation in the first place. We believe this motion is an extension of the current principle that we hold in our liberal democracy. We are happy to propose. Thank you.
The problem of the opposition bench is that they are trapped by the status quo bias based on the social construct that we have right now that takes life as a paramount value in our society. And for that, they know only to evaluate impacts from our current perspective, but that's not what you must do in this debate. Because what you must do is put yourselves in the shoes of the people that choose to take the option of euthanasia, and it is not a bad outcome for them at all. And that's our case, and that's why we propose this motion. Firstly, I want to talk about opening government. There are two broad claims that opening government makes. The first is to do with the principle of body autonomy. The reason why we take it over OG on this ground is because, firstly, they don't nuance body autonomy to why the choice to death is particularly important. And this is important because there are things that are bad in society as a whole. We don't understand why death was uniquely important for body autonomy to have access to via the motion, expanding choices of individuals. Or they did not prove that, why the right to death is insufficiently provided in the status quo. If you, look at opposition's case, they already suggest reasons or some reasons as to why the choice already exists, and OG concedes to this. That's the problem of OG. What Mitsushi tells you in his speech is that death is firstly an important right in and of itself, but secondly, there's a state mandate to facilitate a good way or good access to death in the same way we facilitate good life. For example, through education, for example, through the provision of medical care, all of that stuff. That is why principally we are ahead of OG. Secondly, their claim was reduction of pain in terms of pragmatic matter. There are two reasons as to why we take it over this as well. Firstly, they do not engage again with the opposition's comparative that even in the status quo, there exists some opportunities to commit suicide, for example, go to Switzerland, go to Netherlands, that sort of stuff. We do. Secondly, OG provides no mechanism on how the reduction of pain improves in the long term. And this is important because in the status quo, there are practices of euthanasia, but we do not know how exactly they work. For example, in many cases in the United States of America, they use lethal injection as a way to execute people, but pain is experienced. We don't know how this is going to be solved in the long term, but we give you reasons for why the currently living people will have an incentive to investigate possibilities in this area, to invest a lot of money in facilitating the technology in the long term, thereby reducing pain. We also tell you reasons as to why people that want to live will be able to access better medical care. So on net, we prove that we reduce pain to a far greater extent compared to OG, and that's the reason why we take it over OG. Now, let's talk about opening opposition. The first claim is that there's an undeniable right to death on the our side of the house, and this means that it is easier for people in general to die. The first response, and the most obvious and important one in this debate, is why is this a bad thing? Because death is a dead end. But why is it a bad thing? It is bad from our perspective because we are living and we want to live, but for the people that choose to die, it is a good option, or if not, a better option at the very least. Those people who are just living without meaning, or those people that suffer from mental illness, take neutrality of death as a far better option compared to continue in living in this hellish world that is our world. That is their world. And that means this is an individual question, and according to our principle, we must prioritize what individuals evaluate their life as. Then the next claim is that, choice would not exist on the our side of the house because it is a biased choice in favor of death. 3 responses. Firstly, society will not entirely encourage death on the our side of the house. In fact, they do not give mechanisms as to why this will be the dominant narrative on the our side of the house. Because many people will continue to prioritize life. Some people would continue to live and continue to want to live. That's why the mixture of 2 narratives is what we, in reality, would have on the our side of the house. But secondly, even if that's not the case, at best this claim is value neutral. For the reason that the status quo is a world where choice that prioritizes life and glorifies life at the expense of the choice to death is presented. Life is also uncertain. People don't know how to experience life or what their future life would look like. That's why the uncertainty of choice is something that exists symmetrically. Third of all, then the question is, what is the difference on the either side of the house? The problem with the opposition's world is that life has cost because you're making people that don't want to live through suffering. That is the cost that people bear, and they force people to bear under their side of the house. On the other side of the house, some people might die unwillingly, even though there are better opportunities in the future. But that is at best an opportunity cost, and in fact, living is made better for a lot of the people as per our extension that proves that medical care would be developed on the other side of the house. So, in terms of comparison, they experience far greater harms in this case as a result of biased choice. The second claim is that it is more difficult to achieve social change. Their mechanism is that you can't criticize the society because it becomes a denial of people's autonomy. Firstly, the premise of this is that all people believe that their autonomy is important and act strictly on the basis of this belief. But that is not true because people are not uniform in ideology in any society. Secondly, there are alternative pathways to criticize the society insofar as, for example, people could say people that want to live are suffering from bullying in school, we must change it. That's the narrative that we still have on the other side of the house. Third of all, it is not clear at all how this situation becomes better on the world of opposition side. Like, individuals won't be able to change the society, especially when they're vulnerable. They needed to have proven this in their case, which they did not. In fact, we told you that individuals are not responsible for their community, for any of the things that happens external to their life, so individual right is important in this case. Lastly, this choice makes people's lives significantly happier, even if they're experiencing suffering in the status quo. But before I explain this, yes.
We've told you from our both speakers that this prevalence unitarily frames the question of life and death as glorifying the choice of death as an exercise of autonomy, and therefore getting rid of the discussions about whether that's a good discussion or not. We think it's better.
Firstly, it's not clear why the existence of euthanasia reinvents that sweeping narrative in the first place. But secondly, it's not clear why your paradigm was a world of neutrality when people glorified life. But why does it make people happier? It makes people happier because people experience less despair insofar as they know that there's a way out always by way of, euthanasia. So they're able to more happily live their life on the outside of the house, which we think is a solution or one of the solutions to people suffering in the status quo. Lastly, on CO, I think they're pretty similar to OO, but the biggest reason as to why they don't take this debate is because they don't engage with our case. They explain that it makes it easier to access death, but it's a good thing as per our characterization. They say that, suicide means that, you attract society's attention and that it's a good thing. Firstly, like suicide is a common thing. It's not that influential. Like only one case in 1,000 cases is reported on their side of the house anyways. But like the fact that families ask for reform is probably symmetric on either side of the house, insofar as family members would not have wanted their kids to die on the other side of the house as well. So it's not clear why this leads to any kind of change. That's why we win.